Welcome back to IDP Plus Trends Offensive Waiver Wire podcast. First off, congratulations to you for making the semifinal fantasy matchups if you are in regular fantasy season. If not, congratulations on making it to the quarterfinals. Very, very important week this week. We got a juicy lineup as far as the skill positions, the running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. But as always, we're going to start this week 16 waiver wire for the offense off looking at the quarterback position. Now, hopefully you're not streaming the quarterbacks for playoffs, but you may be in two quarterback leagues where this applies to you, or if you are streaming, hats off to you and best of luck. But if you are in that boat, or if you're in those two-man quarterback leagues, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be a trustworthy, a good option going into the weekend this week. Can't say trustworthy. Last week, his matchup versus the Rams, we saw Brock Purdy get absolutely shut down by the Rams. So there is a lot of risk here. But if you're in the two quarterback league, that might be all you got is two quarterbacks. So you're going to throw Rodgers out. There obviously is huge upside to Aaron Rodgers. We saw two of his last 6 games have 3 touchdowns. One of them had Garrett Wilson have 2 touchdowns. Devontae Adams 1. This past week, week 15, we saw Devontae with 2 and Garrett Wilson with only 1. But still, for Aaron Rodgers, 3 touchdown games, 2 of them, again, in the last 6 games. So pretty impressive feat. He gets another great matchup on paper with the Rams, which should be a better game than what Brock Purdy saw in the rain. I wouldn't look at that as a barometer of what's going to happen here for Aaron Rodgers. This Rams team gives up a lot of throwing plays to opposing quarterbacks, and I think that's a great recipe for Rodgers. They do have a great defense, a great defensive line. Aaron Rodgers actually, as well as 289 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. He did have his high rushing marker of the year with 6 carries for 45 rushing yards. Kind of looked like an old throwback game where Aaron Rodgers is in the Green Bay jersey and an MVP type of caliber year. And it was a great matchup, but it is going to be another great matchup this week versus the Rams. So once again, Aaron Rodgers, as much risk he does have also tremendous upside. So Aaron Rodgers, keep that in mind if you're using him. Hope for 40, but expect 20. Moving on, Russell Wilson owned in 49% of Yahoo leagues. Another solid, I think, matchup, at least. Another solid projection for Russell Wilson to be in a good spot for production versus the Baltimore Ravens at their home at Baltimore this time. If you're going to say they play Baltimore twice, what do you do in the first game? Yeah, the last game wasn't looking too hot. Week 11 versus Baltimore. This is in Pittsburgh. 205 passing yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. So that does give us another, low marker here, another low potential risky play. But at the same time, Russell Wilson, he's had 6 touchdowns in his last 3 games. And this Baltimore secondary gives up a lot of yardage. I expect Baltimore to be up in this game, so game flow should be there for Russell Wilson to be down. This is a game where you're gonna have to weigh your options because of the inactives. I mean, we know that as of right now, George Pickens doesn't look like he's going to play. Didn't practice. T.J. Watt did not practice. It's Tuesday right now, so it's early in the week, but you might not know all that information. It looks like Pickens will be out again, which of course hurts Russell Wilson's deep ball ability, and it hurt him last week versus Philly. And if you're looking at last week versus Philly for a barometer, throw a grain of salt because this matchup versus Baltimore is a much better, friendlier matchup to quarterbacks than Philly was last week. So don't just say they didn't have Pickens. That's why Russell Wilson did bad. It was a tough matchup when it's all said and done. So Russell Wilson, I think, in division matchup, this game could get dicey, it could get sloppy, but I do think at least Russell Wilson will have game script, game flow. Being down in this game, the ability to continue to throw the ball, I think that's one thing that he'll have. So it's a good game script for him, and possibly the best of the rest. When we look at Drake May, 13% owned on Yahoo leagues, another guy who I think is due for a good game script this week. He's got a matchup versus Buffalo. But let's look at last week real quick versus Arizona. 202 passing yards with a passing touchdown and an interception. also had 14 rushing yards, which isn't uncommon. Surprised he didn't have more, but also did have one rushing touchdown versus Arizona. So, Drake May, ups and downs. We've seen games majority where he's only getting one touchdown, which, of course, hurts us in fantasy. Um, of course, this game is not going to be in a dome like the Detroit Buffalo game was, so don't look for that for an exact correlation. I don't know, the weather in Buffalo might be, rain, might be snow, might be fine, but at the same time, consider that as well. Drake May has had um, in the last 5 games at least 2 touchdowns in 2 of the games. So and I say at least 2, that's combined, passing and rushing. So don't forget, Drake May, don't just look at him and say, he's gotten one passing touchdown only in the past couple games. He does have the ability that most quarterbacks do not to get in the end zone with his feet. So Drake May is going to be in a good game script. They're going to be down at Buffalo, so I expect him to throw more than usual, which makes him a good play for fantasy. Moving on to our running backs, the first guy, biggest name I want to talk about of the week is Jacoby Ford. I'm sorry, Jerome Ford. I wish it was Jacoby Ford. That boy was electric. Jerome Ford owned in 44% of Yahoo leagues last week, week 15, versus the Chiefs. 7 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown. Of course, a big touchdown, a 62-yard run, and 2 catches for 20 yards after Nick Chubb was out and has reportedly broken his foot in that game versus the Chiefs, which leaves a huge void. Again, Jerome Ford, those 7 touches, majority were after Chubb got hurt, and so was the yardage. And this is going to be a game where Jameis Winston is now being benched. We get reports that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be the starter here. So I think that definitely not only caps Jerry Jeudy, Tillman, Njoku's upside, but also in the run game too with Jerome Ford. So maybe they try to, see what Dorian Thompson-Robinson can do and stack the box and make him throw to beat Cincinnati that way. But I really don't like this matchup as much as I did now that I get the news that DTR is going to start. Nonetheless, we do have a situation where it's the playoffs. You're getting a starting running back from the waiver wire. Doesn't happen often, so he should be good for about 8 to 10 carries and a few catches. So PPR especially makes him a juicier play. But keep in mind that Deontay Foreman maybe also part of this backfield somehow, some way. Maybe he takes majority of first and second down carries, and that leaves Jerome Ford with only third down. But after that 62-yard touchdown Jerome Ford had last week, I think he's going to get the first look. It should be the running back to start here in Cleveland this week versus Cincinnati, who just got tore up by Tajay Spears, especially in the pass game. So Jerome Ford, is definitely somebody who's capable in the pass game. And, if he has lead back capabilities, then maybe Tajay Spears' box score output last week is a barometer for Jerome Ford this week. But nonetheless, he's a starting running back here in the playoffs, makes him the number 1 claim. This guy could be tied neck and neck, but we just don't know if he's going to be deemed the starter, and that's Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller only owned in 15% of Yahoo leagues, 9 carries for 46 yards in Week 15 versus Washington, which actually led the team. Alvin Kamara was hurt his adductor, which is in the groin, connects the groin to the pelvic bone. He is questionable as of right now. He did have a couple carries after that injury occurred. I think it was 2 carries, but ultimately was ruled out. So, you look at those 2 carries after the injury, you're thinking to yourself, it must not have been that bad. But he did, on the other hand, miss the rest of the game. And of course, if Alvin Kamara, vital part of that Saints offense, if he was healthy enough to go, I'm sure he would have. So the fact that he is still not practicing, still not looking good, doesn't look good for, doesn't bode well for Kamara's availability. And in that case, if Kendre Miller is the starter and Kamara is active, immediately puts Kamara in the top 24 versus Green Bay. Who Charbonnet had a nice week too last week, scored a nice rushing touchdown. And I think Kendre Miller has some upside here. This is kind of similar situation, kind of maybe a scary situation, same as last year, because Kendre Miller got this opportunity, I believe, one of the last games and just fizzled and didn't make good on it. So knock on wood, hopefully that's not the case this year. But Kendre Miller looks like he may have some volume we may have to look his way in the playoffs this week. Moving on to our last running back. Again, this is a third running back who you can start in your lineups, especially in deeper leagues, and we can't really say that too often anymore in at least this year with waiver wire. So juicy week at running back. The third running back I'm going to give you, definitely startable, especially in PPR, and especially the deeper you are, is Tajay Spears, owned in 45% of Yahoo leagues. 4 carries for 5 yards and a touchdown, and 6 catches for 87 yards with a touchdown versus Cincinnati in Week 15. He looked great with Mason Rudolph, especially in the fourth quarter, especially in garbage time. He did score a 1-yard touchdown in the first quarter. Of course, the rushing box score isn't very impressive, 4 carries for 5 yards, but that's not really Tajay Spears' game. He's going to hit you with what he did in the fourth quarter, a 17-yard touchdown reception. Again, 6 catches on the day for the running back with 87 receiving yards. And the key takeaway here is most of this work was with Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph's going to get the nod in Week 16, which helps Tajay Spears' chances of repeating this performance. Don't think he's going to have 25 points again, but I think that Mason Rudolph being the starter and Tajay Spears just having this great output is going to help him get some more touches and more looks for this next game. And I wanted to look back. I know Mason Rudolph started some games, so I was maybe thinking like, what did Tajay Spears do in those games where Rudolph started to kind of gauge their rapport? But you can't really look at that because unfortunately it's an invalid take, as Week 7, 8, and 9 when Rudolph started, Tajay Spears missed those 3 games. So unfortunately we don't have that to go off of, that track record. But if we just look at last game where Rudolph did relieve Will Levis there late in the game, that's where Tajay Spears, of course, they were down. Game script was in his favor, not Pollard's at that time. So that did him a favor too. And hopefully they're going to be down versus Cincinnati. I'm sorry, I forget who they played this week. I'll have to check. But hopefully, the Titans are down in this game and Tajay Spears can get some more catches this week. So I think Tajay Spears is a great play and 3 good running back plays for you there this week. Moving on to wide receiver, we'll have, I think, another solid 2 solid wide receivers for you this week. First one's definitely startable, especially in deeper leagues, and that's Jalen McMillan. And I'm going to say this is my last call for Jalen McMillan. This is the 3rd consecutive week I've mentioned him. Still only owned in 10% of Yahoo leagues, but after this second big spike week, that number is going to definitely go up tomorrow morning. 5 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown last week versus the Chargers. Back-to-back games with 50 receiving yards and a touchdown. And over the last 2 games combined, 13 targets for 9 receptions, 134 yards, and 3 touchdowns just in those 2 games. Week 16, magic continues to roll. The forecast is looking good. Good matchup versus Dallas. Cake matchup to Dallas, who's giving up top 10 points to wide receivers. So Jalen McMillan gets probably the best out of the 3 matchups he has had over the last 2 games, over the last 3, if we're including this week, that the best matchup he's had yet. So Jalen McMillan, I do not think this is a fluke. Maybe getting better chemistry with Baker Mayfield. I know Mike Evans has to continue to finish the year out strong to make good on that another consecutive 1,000-yard year. But Jalen McMillan is helping taking some pressure off Mike Evans. Of course, he's eating into a little bit of Cade Otton's volume too, but I think he's in a consistent spot here. Jalen McMillan, not going to say he's going to go have a 3rd game consecutively with a touchdown, but I do think these 5 receptions for 75 yards or 50 at least is a good barometer. So making him a 10-point PPR play, I think is a safe bet this week. So Jalen McMillan versus Dallas, like him a lot. Again, only owned in 10% of Yahoo leagues, but that's going to change real quick. Next is someone who I've mentioned a couple weeks too, is Keon Coleman, owned in 41% of Yahoo leagues. And yes, you're going to tell me that he only had 2 targets last week and 1 catch. Well, that was a big catch. It was 62 yards. But it wasn't, going to light up the box score. It wasn't a touchdown with single-digit effort, sure. But the key takeaway is this was his first game back, looking healthy, finished without re-aggravating his hand injury. 4 games he's missed I'm going to cut Keon Coleman some slack that he didn't show up so much in the box score. This is a game where Josh Allen threw the ball to, I believe, 9 or 10 different receivers. Ty Johnson got 5 catches. Things were abnormal here in this Buffalo and Detroit game. But regardless, Keon Coleman is in a great, one of the, if not the best offenses you could ask for. So I want as many shares of that as I can. Keep in mind, Amari Cooper did not have a target in this game. So maybe on one hand, you're saying, Keon Coleman, you should have done more. But keep in mind, again, this was a game where Josh Allen was just throwing it to whoever, James Cook, Ty Johnson, tight ends, Mac Hall, everything was clicking. Now, some people will say Keon Coleman is a touchdown or bust option. I don't think it's exactly the case. This was just a wacky game. Amari Cooper didn't get targets. Keon Coleman only had this one catch. And to me, I don't think that Keon Coleman is touchdown dependent. Actually, I kind of look at this on the other hand. Week 7 through 11, so those 5 games, when Keon Coleman was hot on the waiver wire, he was over 50% owned. Those 5 games, he had collectively 45 targets, 36 catches, 351 yards, and no touchdowns. That's an average over those 5 games of 9 targets a game, 7 catches a game, and 70 yards. So in PPR, you're looking at 14 points over those 5 games. Then, last 2 games, he's had a touchdown. So those 4 games, he didn't have a touchdown. Then the most recent games, besides Buffalo, he's had touchdowns. So it's like, I don't think he's really touchdown dependent. The volume was there without touchdowns. Now the volume wasn't there, but the touchdown. So if he can kind of fall in between 4 or 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, I mean, that's going to help you win your semi week matchup here in playoffs. And I'm not saying, and if you're in a shallow league, roll out, Keon Coleman with confidence. This is for a deeper league when you're looking for him versus like a Pat Freiermuth, some other kind of flex. I do think Keon Coleman has huge upside, upside that was looking like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Those 25-point games, most likely probably a 15 to 20-point game. Maybe his upside is a little bit lower than Scantling's when he's at his best. But, as of what's happening in New Orleans, I'd rather have Keon Coleman in my lineup than MVS at this point. But, yes, even though he may have a lower floor, especially right now coming off the injury, and last game he only had 2 targets, I think Keon Coleman is somebody if smart managers who look forward instead of looking back can gauge and say, yeah, he was on fire. This team's going to go to the playoffs. I think they're going to refine the chemistry between Allen and Keon Coleman. I think that's the vet move here in fantasy. So I think Keon Coleman is someone, maybe you don't start him, but you definitely want on your team, because the last thing you want is him to erupt this week. You can't get a waiver in him, for him, and then your opponent, you're playing in the fantasy championship, and your opponent now has Keon Coleman fresh off a 25-point performance. So that's the worst case scenario. So at least pick up Keon Coleman if you have a spot to stash. But definitely another wide receiver that you can get away with starting in your semis. Good dart throw there. Moving on to our last segment, tight ends. I got 3 solid tight ends. Another juicy, skill position here. 3 startable guys. Doesn't happen often, so take advantage. Number 1, Brenton Strange. 12 targets, 11 catches for 73 yards. The, yards per catch was not juicy. It was just over 6. But with Evan Ingram out the year, I'm not really throwing this game out because he did have his biggest target. We saw Strange do some work with a healthy Ingram. Now he's out the year. In the next game, he gets 12 targets and 11 catches. Yeah, I'm putting some stock in that, and I think that Brenton Strange is definitely not somebody who I want to rely on. If I'm in a shallow league, I'm not starting Brenton Strange. But if I'm in a deeper league and I need a flex, or my tight end may be hurt this week, I'm probably looking for Brenton Strange as my number 1 option. If not, if you're a roll the dice type of guy, you're looking for that high play, I think Noah Gray offers maybe not volume over Brenton Strange. We know Strange will probably get more targets, more catches, but Noah Gray definitely, I think, has the higher touchdown upside. He's had 5 in the last 5 games, 2 catches for 21 yards and a touchdown in Week 15 versus Cleveland. Perhaps he's still touchdown dependent as a tight end. Yes, I'd agree with that, but as long as Mahomes is starting in this game, and as long as this is I forget how many games, eight games now that Noah Gray has started and played more than 50% of snaps. So, they run a lot of two tight end sets. Patrick Mahomes, just like Josh Allen, is a guy who can throw it to a lot of different people. And Noah Gray, even though the receptions were low last week, still got the touchdown, still got his 5 targets. I think he's definitely earned a solid role here in this Kansas City offense. And this is the way you want to see it. You don't want somebody who starts out the year hot in Kansas City. You want the tight end that's ending the year hot when it's time to go to the playoffs, because this is going to run into the playoffs. This is what they're trying to do, to have another solid tight end to throw to. So Noah Gray, I think this is kind of just the beginning, or maybe this is what we should get used to. At least I don't think he's going to fade, and I think he's a fine touchdown dependent, low floor but high ceiling type of play for you at the tight end position this week. So Strange and Gray are my number 1 and 2. But this guy kind of could be a wild card. Stone Smart, owned in 5% of Yahoo leagues, had 6 targets and 5 catches for 50 yards versus Tampa Bay. Granted, it was a great matchup. He's not going to get a great matchup this week versus Denver. And we look at Denver's defense as their strong defense, one of the best in the league. Yes, they are. But when it comes to tight ends, they're just middle of the road. They allow the 16th most points to tight ends, so they're no killer there. Patrick Surtain is not going to be on Stone Smart, most likely going to be on Quentin Johnson, which is good for not only Smart but McConkey as well. You also look at a team defense in the Broncos who blitz a lot, which means that Justin Herbert should be able to get the ball off quick, which again bodes well for McConkey and Stone Smart versus Quentin Johnson. I do still like Quentin Johnson as a dart throw this week, but Stone Smart, I think, may have just as much volume, or if not more, than Quentin Johnson this week. Keep in mind, last week McConkey was the leading receiver for the Chargers, but Stone Smart with 50 yards only had 8 fewer than the leader. So Stone Smart is definitely earned a role. Don't worry about Will Dissly. He continues to be out. And if we look at the last 2 weeks, what Stone Smart has done since assuming the tight end starting role, he's had 8 catches for 104 yards. So that's, if you're in PPR leagues, that's 18 points over 2 weeks. So that's an average of 9. If you're out there and you need to get by, you don't really feel like you need to reach for the stars. Instead of taking a Noah Gray, or instead of taking Brenton Strange, maybe you kind of go for this tight end option here. Stone Smart, I mean, he's got solid volume, and only 8 yards behind the leader McConkey. Who knows? If you're believing in Surtain, what he's going to do as far as Quentin Johnson, maybe shut him down a little bit, which bodes well and gets more targets to Stone Smart. So, I think it is a team we look at that lost J.K. Dobbins. He's not going to be back this game again. Vidal and Gus Edwards just did not look good again. So Stone Smart, I think that this is going to be the route that the Chargers are going to have to use to win the game, is being thrown the ball, and I think Stone Smart's going to be a big part of it. So Stone Smart, last of my 3 tight ends there. And just want to say before I wrap it up, thank you to all of you viewers and listeners who are subscribers. I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys coming back, leaving me nice comments. Any comments, questions you have, put them in the chat. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And before I send off, just want to say one more thing. Best of luck in your semi-week championship matchups, and best of luck in the rest of your playoffs. Happy holidays here from not only myself, but everyone here at IDP Plus. And thanks for rocking with me. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.